All right, we are digging for wisdom. This is the last regular season week, and before we even can contemplate going into week 11, me and Diggsy, who you see over there, it's always Diggsy. I don't even know why I have to introduce him. Y'all know who he is. You've seen him millions of times. We got to talk about the bangers from last week, because last week we talked about these games, and even though I was in agreement with you on your predictions, I threw out some devil advocate stuff just so I could show you a path that maybe some of these teams could pull off the wins that I didn't truly believe in. But I threw them out there anyway, and it turns out everything that I put out there kind of came true, and those teams won. I mean, let's start with that Duncanville-DeSoto game, which sadly, because of the World Series combined with the thunderstorms and rains, I couldn't even show highlights of that game. We had to record our show in the third quarter of the Duncanville game. I couldn't even show the highlights of it, so I'm very depressed about that the whole weekend long. But as a devil's advocate, I brought up, I don't know, well, DJ Bailey hasn't thrown any interceptions, and if he has a big game, then possibly they could win there, which he did. And I threw out, Duncanville's kind of had to shut it down after a quarter and a half the whole season. Maybe they'll come out lackadaisical. And they got hit in the mouth several times, and they did come out a little lackadaisical. Tell me your first off impressions of that game, and how Cloud Mass's team came out on top and really kind of stuck it to them and played some really good ball out there Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, just a 48-minute physical battle. It was fun to watch. I got to watch some of the live streaming of the game, and it was a fun game to watch. And a lot of people, you could kind of give that angle about, well, they started out lackadaisical. Well, Duncanville, DeSoto jumped up 14-0, but Duncanville tied it. So, I mean, they took the punch, they absorbed it, and they got back in. And then DeSoto continued and kept going. And really, I think the biggest surprise, and it wasn't a massive performance on the running game, but DeSoto was just able to pound them 3 to 5 yards at a time, which, made their save. And Duncanville never really played off of that. Duncanville kind of said, okay, we're worried about the passing game. You can run on us. We'll give you the 3 to 5 yards. And I think that was a mistake. And I think the coaches over there, the DC over there is going to have to take a real intrinsic look at that game plan, because it didn't work. And I'm thinking now North Crowley. North Crowley has the same kind of team that DeSoto has as far as being able to pound that running game. And assuming nothing happens with Jimerson, they're going to have a really good running back, because we know Ryder didn't play in this game. I think North Crowley will have that, and they're going to have the wide receivers who can do some things. They have a really good formula if Duncanville doesn't make any defensive adjustments to replicate this potentially in the fifth round of the playoffs if they make it there. But when you look at Duncanville's rushing yards, it wasn't anything that you just go, wow, look at that. I mean, Marvin Duffy, 25 carries, 96 yards, 4 yards a run. Jalen Jones, 15 runs, 74 yards, 5 yards a run. It was 4 and 5 yards, just peppering them, putting them in third and short. And then what you got DJ Bailey, as you talked about, with another perfect game. And these are one of these weird games that, when I look at that, how can you not watch this game and not think that DJ Bailey is one of the best quarterbacks in the state of Texas? How do you not watch that and go, okay, this kid is for real? But then you have all these other players who are losing and throwing turnovers and doing this and that. But, they're 6'3", they're 6'4". They have, they do good in some of these Elite 11 things, and they're getting way better offers than DJ Bailey. I want DJ Bailey to be my quarterback. I want him to come on this podcast and lead this thing and take us to unprecedented heights, because what he does for DeSoto is legendary. And before Duncanville could figure out what was happening, they could not recover, and they had no answer for it. And DeSoto, just a complete team game, and in a DeSoto team that wasn't at 100%. People are going to say, well, DeCorian Moore didn't play the whole game and this, that, and the other. It didn't matter. There are no excuses. You cannot say this, that. DeSoto beat him up.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that about DJ, because I was texting with his dad after the game Saturday, and I was like, man, those coaches at Sam Houston's got to be biting their nails right now, because I don't know how much longer he's not going to get any big-time offers, especially after that game. He's got to get more offers than he's got now. He may have verbally committed to Sam Houston, but boy, them offers have got to be coming through. And it's also about time for us on this podcast to give Dalen Singleton some props as well, man. SMU-bound wide receiver had, 3 humongous plays in that game on the kickoff return, and then 2 and DeSoto's special teams. But it was just a total package win for him. No Tiger riding. And now when Tiger comes back, that's a 1-2 punch with him and Buford. You got the wide receivers. You got the defense. They've got to be feeling pretty good. I know I'm feeling pretty good about this team as far as a repeat of the 6A Division II title before who knows what happens with them after this year. Let's talk a little bit about Duncanville. Where do they go from here? Is this gonna rally them up to, all right, well, we're going to still fight through here and get our state title. That's just one little speed bump that we hit.
Are you ready? Are you ready to like clip this and put it out there? Because I'm about to say something very controversial. I'm about to say something maybe stupid, given all of this that happened. It's a little bit stupid. Like, I know it. I know I'm about to say something stupid. I know I'm about to be disrespectful to a big tier of this audience, and still I'm going to say it because I believe it to be true. I still think Duncanville has a better chance to win state than DeSoto does. Just because when DeSoto gets going, can they do this? Can they play at that high of a level? And I think Coach Mathis likes that. I don't think he likes it, but I think he thrives on that doubt. That we finally slayed this beast. Now what is Diggs going to say next? Now what is the Dub going to say next? Now what is that next person going to say next? And I just worry about is this DeSoto's Super Bowl? Did they just win their Super Bowl in this game? And how will they respond in the playoffs? Because they're going to play some really good teams in the playoffs. Now, this is 2 straight where I've been made to look stupid. Geyer did it. Even Allen to a certain extent, even though I picked him over Allen. And now they slayed the beast in Duncanville. Can they do this? Because Division II, I think, is a lot harder. Can they play perfect football in the playoffs against really good teams? The Duncanville formula, I think, works a lot closer to North Shore, but can they do that in the big scheme of things through 6 weeks? Because high school football playoffs, it is hard to win a football game in just general. You know that as a Commanders fan. You know how hard it is to win a football game. You got to do that 6 times against really good teams in the playoffs. And down there in that Houston team, there are some really under the radar, really good teams like Willis and the Woodlands. And I don't know necessarily, I don't have memorized how that all shakes out D1, D2. But DeSoto's not going to be just playing, these really bad teams going into things. They're going to be playing some pretty good teams on the bottom half of the bracket. The top half of the bracket is looking better as the weeks go on, with Wiley East performing very well. I'm not saying Wiley East is a contender necessarily to beat DeSoto. I'm just saying it's not going to be these blowout games where if DeSoto has one of these 170-yard penalty games and 3 turnover games that they've had in some of their wins, they're going to get caught. So I think Duncanville has a little bit of a better chance. Now, how does Duncanville respond? I think that's going to be a big answer for that, because Duncanville is always about North Shore. It's all about North Shore. DeSoto, it's all about Duncanville. And now that DeSoto has slayed that beast with Duncanville is still looking at the big prize. Now, DeSoto, how will they respond for that 6 weeks? I still think if I'm not to say DeSoto isn't a favorite. I've got them number 1 too. I mean, I'm not saying I'm picking them to lose a game, but I think if I'm talking about going to Vegas, going to Choctaw right now, I can put $100 on DeSoto or Duncanville, one of those teams to win state. Putting my money on Duncanville right now, even though they lost that game, because they don't have to play each other again. And Duncanville got over that mental hurdle of North Shore, and I think they're focused on Week 17 right now. DeSoto has really been focused on this Duncanville game. Was that disrespectful, Ward?
That was disrespectful. And I think you just won DeSoto. You just won DeSoto a state title because Claude Mathis and that DeSoto social media team is going to slice that up, and they're going to use it as his go-to me against the world stuff. They're working right now. I can already see their little factory of social media guys putting something together. They don't have to worry about calling him the voice. They know who it is. It's Diggs. Diggsy says this.
# Diggs doubt.
Exact. Diggs doubt. Diggs is disrespectful at the mouth yet again with DeSoto. 8 years after you said it the first time, to disrespectful at the mouth, he's back at it again.
Back at it.
Looking at the The other bad.
They are my number one team. I mean, I got them number one, so it's not complete disrespect. But 6 weeks, playoffs. I'm thinking of matchups and how everything rolls out with that. And I think Duncanville, this is going to be a big lesson. And you're going to talk about Carroll and Byron Nelson. I'm going to say kind of the same thing as far as that goes with Carroll and Byron Nelson. I think this is going to be a really pivotal learning experience for both of these teams that lost to try to figure it out before the games matter. You go 14-0 and all of a sudden you have this one game, you're done. Like Denton Geyer last year, they got hit in the mouth by DeSoto. They're done. It's it. You get that chance. If it happens in the regular season, you get humbled real quick in a game that matters but doesn't matter as far as you winning state.
Right. I hear what you're saying. Get that thing started, Claude. Get that social media train working, man. We got somebody to hate on. His name's Diggs, not the voice. Hey, look, the other one I said, the only path I saw for Byron Nelson winning was their defense stepping up and playing like they've played all year. Against the South Lake team that has scored 72 times in a row, I wasn't really buying it, but I was like, this is their path to win. Well, that's what they did. They got the turnovers they needed. They shut it down. I mean, what was it? They scored. South Lake scored 17. One of them wasn't really a touchdown. That was a interception that I felt was obvious to me, but they called it a touchdown anyway. So talk to me about Byron Nelson. Now they're at a sky high. You putting them in the same boat there with DeSoto that they may be too high after this win? Because they did have the fans storm the field.
It was fun. This was a program-defining win for Byron Nelson. I mean, this is their best win in their high school history. I mean, when it comes to football, and you look at that, and there's reason to be excited. And one thing I am constantly amazed by as a high school football analyst is when you have a really good defense against a really good offense, and that defense is better than the offense, how completely inept that offense can look. And Byron Nelson made South Lake Carroll look like a little league team that had been practicing out there. And they basically said, okay, we're going to shut your receivers down. Knowles couldn't overcompensate that. And you can try to run on our front four, our front seven, but we don't even have to bring extra help into the box because our defensive line, we got it. So Carroll couldn't run against their base. They couldn't throw against having that extra high safety. They were just shut down, and Knowles couldn't figure it out. I think the one path I could kind of see in watching the highlights, there could have been some scramble opportunities. There could have been some misdirection. But those are just single individual plays that I think, maybe Carroll can make this adjustment, make that adjustment next time. Overall, they got locked down by Byron Nelson. And I don't know how you can overcome that in the future. Maybe Wormley will have a little bit more endurance. Maybe he'll have a little bit more pop. Maybe he'll be able to break a tackle or two in that defensive line that he wasn't able to break if they have to play in the fourth round of the playoffs. But it was a complete dominant performance by Byron Nelson over Carroll. And when I look at how those interceptions were thrown, it wasn't like, Knowles was, these little tip things that you see with Dak. It was, you got to throw something to try to convert a thing. And Byron Nelson was just there. It was, like the sticky paper on you. It's like, how you got that hat on your head to cover your chrome dome right now. It ain't moving. And that's how Byron Nelson's secondary was on Carroll's receivers. This is the first time where Carroll's receivers just were completely inefficient. And that's kind of maybe the downfall we weren't talking about with Carroll, is that their receivers don't seem to be as strong as their previous patch of receivers. And that was a bad matchup against Byron Nelson when you kind of watch the highlights. And that was one, I always talk about things in hypotheticals. If they played this game 10 times this week, who wins? And Byron Nelson would win 9 of those 10 games, maybe all 10. I don't like to say 100% of the games, but this was not a fluke. This was not one of these things where you had a special teams play and a tip pass and a bad referee call. Byron Nelson beat them up and dominated them. So now Carroll has to go into that culture, that dominant kind of performance where they have to go, okay, who are we now? And they have to answer some internal questions to get better. But you know what? They get hit this early. They get hit in week 10. They get to do those questions now before it's too late.
Yeah, exactly. That's for both of those teams. It's good to have this thing happen where you still have time to recover from it, so you're not shocked for the whole off season. The third banger was Timberview and Richland, and boy, I was at that one. I was so impressed by Richland. They ran a little NASCAR offense on Timberview and really rushed that thing. And the play of Gates and the coach's son plus Plus, Michael Turner, I mean, if y'all didn't know about him already, he's, look up the dictionary under workhorse. You'll see his picture right there. You give that man the ball as much as you want. He's coming back next year, too. Michael Turner, we're talking about. Talk to me about how you felt about that game as well.
Yeah, I was most surprised out of all three of the games at this one. And again, this wasn't a fluke situation either. No. And this is one of those scenarios. We had mentioned one of the pathways that we were concerned about Timberview, and it was kind of the pathway you talked about last year that you were concerned about Timberview. Is they don't play anybody, right. And we didn't, they're two non-district games. You don't really get to, beating Sam Houston. Oh, it's like you're not really going to get much of a read out of that game. And now Richland was good enough to earn that win and beat them at that level. I think what we learned was Timberview wasn't quite that level. I think we overvalued Timberview to where Richland didn't overvalue them. Richland knew exactly what they had. Richland knew they were good enough to take care of business. And like you talked about, their offensive line, I underrated them. I underrated the receivers. And that was some of the things that, people were talking about with Richland. Like they were winning track in 5A last year. They were competing in that. Don't overlook that. And I'm like, I'm overlooking that. And, you come back and you see how efficient their passing game was, like you talked about with Cates. And, they had like 4 or 5 receivers who were doing things. Xavier Johnson, Deion Jones, Aaron Brooks, Michael Turner. These were players that were just contributing for Richland. And although Timberview had their big dogs in there, the infrastructure of Timberview wasn't as good as I thought they were going to be. I talked about offensive and defensive line. And Richland, hadn't really had a chance to show that off against a good team because they hadn't played anybody to date. And they showed that off, and they showed out. Richland with a solid win. I think that this was more, for me, a speech about Timberview being too high more than Richland just being completely disrespected. I think now we have answers on who they are. This is a really tough region, Ward, and I think, Richland and Timberview, I don't see how farther either of these teams are going to get maybe past the second round. But you know what? You can put me on a little bit of a loop and say I'm just disrespecting Richland again, right. And who knows? Maybe they're way even better than I think they are after they beat Timberview and showed me how good they are.
What do you think about I think Richland's going to go through Frisco, but what do you think about Timberview Wakeland matchup now? Because they were probably
that Timberview Wakeland game is all of a sudden one of those games that you might have to send a camera crew out to, because when we're talking about competitive first round games, because Wakeland is right there with Reedy and Lone Star. They're definitely a tier above what Frisco is putting out there. So you got Brennan Meyer out there. If he can duplicate that, I don't think my problem in that is I don't think they have the running game that Richland has to be able to duplicate that against Timberview. But Brennan Meyer can be that running game, or at least contribute part of that running game. And they're going to have the receivers very much like Richland had the receivers to be able to do that. Now, will Timberview take this as a learning mechanism and get back in there and have that humility thing? With Timberview in their past, I don't know if they're going to learn from this like I think Duncanville and South Lake Carroll are. I think Timberview is who they are this year, and I think they're probably 2 rounds deep and done.
Yeah. Well, a lot of news around social media is a lot to do with the numbers coming in, the snapshot days coming in, and who might be going up, who might be going down. Let's talk a little realignment before we get into this week's games. What are some of the numbers that you see that are kind of shocking you, or not shocking you, but really interesting to you of who may be going up and down?
And they're going to keep coming out, and that's the great thing. Shout out to Dave Campbell's who are sourcing all of these numbers. This is not my personal knowledge. That crew, when it comes to Snapshot Day and realignment, has done a fantastic job with their base, getting it out there, asking, and then some of the analysis. And we can cut the pie however we want to. I always am going to see the pie from the Plano East point of view and say, okay, how can I get this pie to look the best for Plano East? You're probably thinking about the pie and how Flower Mound is going to look good. You're probably, when you hear pie, Ward, you're probably thinking about a nice New York City pizza pie.
I'm getting hungry now. Thanks a lot.
Maybe a little bit of apple pie for you, but I'm thinking about Plano East when I think about pie. Yeah. All kinds of different pie. I'm thinking about Panther pie.
Cut me a slice. Cut me a slice. I'm
Cutting that
hungry.
slice. So I'm thinking of the North, and where McKinney North is likely to go up, and Princeton and Sherman are definitely in 6A numbers. So now you're starting to get that growth kind of on the 75 corridor. Kind of look over to that middle area. There's not really any growth. All the Denton schools and Louisville schools and Coppell, and that's kind of where they are. But then you look out east, and you're starting to see a little bit more growth there. Longview looks to be turning in a 6A number. Forney is a 6A number. So now you're looking at that base 7 that they have out there and adding potentially Longview and Forney to that group. Then you kind of look over to the south. You see Bryan Adams is moving up. They're going to have a 6A number. So you're starting to go, okay, well, Skyline, Bryan Adams, that might end up more northerly as opposed to southerly. Kind of look at the south. DeSoto, that's one of the questions. Are they going to be a 5A or 6A? They've got 5A numbers, but will they opt up to 6A? Lancaster is going to be a 6A program now, so you kind of see that pressure, and that pressure might move Mansfield over with the Arlington schools again. And then you kind of look out toward the west, you kind of see, okay, you got Aledo potentially moving up, that they're a fringe team. You've got Pascal moving down, and you got some of the Eagle Mountain ISD schools. Where are they going to go? There's a lot of definitely fascinating things that are happening with realignment in DFW, and we're getting more teams. So I think, Ward, we're going to see, if you remember how 5A Division I looks and you're kind of frustrated because you have all these 9-team districts just left and right, I think we're going to see a lot of 9-team districts in the DFW area. And I also think, and you're going to like this, Ward, because I know you hate Central Texas out there, I think we're going to see DFW go through 12 6A this year, so we're not going to have to worry about these first-round games against the Waco Midways and Pflugerville Weisses and Harker Heights. So we'll keep it there, and then it'll truly be in the third round. You'll have all the Dallas teams against the Houston teams at that point when they play, and I know that'll make you happy because it'll make your producing job easier, not having to worry about Pflugerville Weiss and Hutto.
I don't mind that at all, my friends. I don't mind that at all, my guy. I don't mind not having to have a spare 12 6A district where it's some super syntax nonsense. I'll keep it North Texas. That's what I like to hear.
Well, and will Waco Midway potentially be coming up, because Waco is one of those fringe teams where they can send them up north if needed or send them south, So we'll have to find out how the pie is working out there in the super syntax and all of that. I love realignment time. It is like a fun time. It's like we get to have extra football season. We get to talk football through February, and you get to do a show.
I do like.
You get to bring me on in February.
Do a little special. Get some coaches in there. Do you think the Planos will be in with the Louisville ISD squads again this year, or do you think because of the movements they're going to go out? They have McKinney's now to get messed with.
They do, and now that you got Princeton, Princeton you can assume is going to be married to McKinney, so that's like a 4-pack there. Sherman you have to think is going to be married to McKinney, and Allen potentially. So when you kind of look at that, you can see over there you got the 2 Prospers and the 2 Dentons. That might make a 9-pack with the 4 Louisvilles and the Coppell, and then you bring over these new 3 teams over there to potentially come with the Plano schools, or you can even push that a little bit further down and maybe have a 4 Louisvilles and 2 Prospers and 3 McKinney schools, and then maybe even send the Planos to be with Richardson, and maybe even the Dallas ISD schools, or even maybe the 2 Mesquite schools. You might see them get pulled out. I remember even covering I think 95, 96, you had Mesquite ISD and Plano ISD in the same district. So it's not completely unheard of to have the Mesquite schools over there if East has grown so much that you got to put some kids out there. And you can even see Princeton and Sherman. These are schools that can get pulled anywhere. You can see Princeton get pulled into that East Texas district potentially with, Forney and Longview and Tyler and those schools, depending on how they want to draw the rubber bands.
It's going to be fun. Man, I can't wait for that February realignment. I love our show when we get some coaches on and we dissect a thing. It usually takes us a couple days to really just sit down and, decompress after realignment day. But it's cool they do this every 2 years, and I certainly love that day.
And Highland Park going down to 5A Division I, so we know another team dropping.
They're a team that very much wavers up and down on that with their numbers. And looks like they're going down this time around. Hey, let's talk about this week's games. 3-6A, We're
I don't even
almost
think we can talk about this game. We're just good right now. Like, we're going to talk about last week's game. We're going to talk about realignment. We're done, Ward.
that's
Just
it.
talk.
Nobody
Put
wants
a
to
bow
do
on
it.
this. Let's talk about girls volleyball. Let's talk about the Plano East Senior High School Panthers playing Allen on Tuesday night, which you'll know the results of the game by this podcast dropping, in the first round of the playoffs. How about those Lady Panthers going out there? They did lose to your Jaguars in a heartbreaker for the district championship seeding. I would have liked to see that game. They got 2-0 on them, but Flower Mound showed that Ward resilience, that Fasold resilience in there, winning the last 3 sets and breaking my heart, Ward.
Complete dominance. I mean, will you? The Wizards, Flower Mound Lady Jags doing their thing.
Lady Jags.
But we're
But
talking.
Ward, I need you this week. You and I. You know how they have those. They have the those little memes where you got the name, you got Ward and Diggs, and you got the handshake. I need that from you, Ward, this week because we need your Jaguars. And I know you want to talk about 3-6A, but we're going to talk about 6-6A and 3-6A, 4-6A, 5-6A. 5A Division II, we're going to be talking Plano East, and we need your Jaguars to take care of business over Plano West this week to ensure that Plano East is a playoff team in 2023, Ward. Make it happen. Go text Coach Basil right now. Just get on your phone, ignore the podcast, and let him know Diggs said this has got to happen. This has got to happen.
I'd have to leave you on your own, and you'd be liable to talk about volleyball. You're already losing everybody talking 6-6A in every single district. Now I can leave you alone for a second so I can text Coach and you're going to start.
But that's what we need because if we're going to talk about Trinity, we got to talk about that Trinity performance against Marcus and how that defense has finally stepped up. It's like that defense has woken up. Marcus woke up the Trinity defense in that game where they just scored 50 points on them, and Trinity decided, you know what? We got this offensive side of the game now. We got to figure out something on defense. And Trinity, this is one of the most impressive runs of Trinity defense I think I've seen since their playoff runs back, when we could actually say Trinity was a playoff threat. We're going to have to get back to 2018, 2019 when Trinity was one of those teams, and they did it with defense. And now all of a sudden you could start to see that foundation being laid for this Trinity program, and they're not just beating these middle tier teams like Crowley and Weatherford. They are just destroying them. And Trinity has definitely got on my radar as a team that I feel like has woken up in the month of October.
Yeah, and maybe they could send some of those defensive players over to Crowley because poor Caleb Williams is over there. Look, I can get y'all 40. I can't get 50. Somebody's got to play defense for me. And we talked about the Crowley kind of Tom Petty deal with the little free-falling deal here. It looks like your thing might come true. They may be done winning this year because I sent you that one clip. They cannot wrap up against Boswell. They couldn't wrap up. They certainly couldn't against Trinity. I don't even know if they put a hand on the guy in Trinity. And now a game that I was dying to go to this week against North Crowley. Sorry, Coach Gates. It's not your fault. I can't go to a blowout like that when there's too many bangers going on. Talk to me about Crowley.
We hypotheticalized that North Crowley could be 9-0 versus 9-0. Definitely a camera crew kind of a game, especially if Crowley was coming in on a high, having beaten Trinity and Boswell. But this Crowley team doesn't look like they're going to win another game at this point. And then potentially a first-round game against Carroll or Byron Nelson, that's not going to work out either way for Crowley. So I think Crowley is going to go 7-4. They're going to be done. 4-game losing streak to lose it. There are a lot of hypotheticals that can happen in 3-6A. You have a potential for 2 ties, a 2-way tie with or 2 spots at the 3-way tie with Crowley, Bell, and Boswell. You potentially have a scenario. It involves Saginaw Boswell losing to Chisholm Trail. Boswell is probably a 5-6 score favorite over Chisholm Trail. So it's not a very realistic scenario, but there is a scenario where you could potentially have 3 teams tying for that 4th playoff spot with LD Bell, Boswell, and Weatherford. But I think the way things are shaping out right now, you're going to have North Crowley, Trinity, Boswell, and Crowley in that order coming from District 3-6A. Bell and Trinity has really been kind of rendered a pointless game in many ways. I know it's still going to matter. I mean, Bell going 7-3 and missing the playoffs will be a heartbreaker for them, really but that's still the way it's trending right now.
Yeah, that would be a devastating deal, but they'll be like, what do we have to do to get in this joint? But what they have to do is they got to win more games, I guess. They got to go 8-2. Let's move on to 4-6A because Keller is now in a situation where they got to win against Holton to get in there. I know we've talked about how they're all busted up, and some of the guys are coming back. I know their best defensive player is still out. They're still struggling as far as staying healthy. They had nothing for Dozie Ezekama last week. I mean, he just had an unreal game like his brother used to do. 13 catches, 100 and God knows how many yards. And now Keller needs to win against Haltom to get into the show.
They do. And one of the things I love about the dump is the fact that we do get people who I've never even heard of before who will throw comments my way, especially if I get very disrespectful at the mouth. And that happens at times when I'm having the dump at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I wrote off Haltom. I said they were not a playoff team. They were done. I even said they were mathematically eliminated. And, we had a couple of people say, Diggs, if this happens, and this happens, Haltom could be playing for in week 11 for a chance to go to the playoffs. I'm like, yeah, they're not beating Eaton, and Keller isn't losing. All these things aren't happening. Every single one of those things happened to lead to this game where we've got Haltom and Keller now for a playoff spot. And there could be the potential for chaos. I at least have to note that if, South Lake Carroll loses to Fossil Ridge, or if Northwest Eaton loses or beats Byron Nelson, there could be this 3-way, 4-way tie. I don't consider that a realistic possibility. But you know what, Ward? I didn't think all these other things could happen at the same time. Now we're talking about Carroll and Nelson losing, so I feel a little bit better about kind of throwing off Eaton and Fossil Ridge. And one of my if I could just be a little bit disrespectful again, Ward, I think you go back to the campfire and some of our initial thoughts, and you were right on this one. I'm going to give you your flowers, Ward, that Northwest Eaton just could not figure it out this year. This has been one of my most disappointing teams with the talent that they have. For them to go 2-5 potentially in this district and not even be competitive against the big dogs in this district, I'm shocked by that. But you were kind of worried about that because you were looking at turnovers. We're talking about Noah Lugo and DJ Bailey and how you were giving DJ Bailey, how important that was that Bailey was not a turnover machine. And Lugo and Northwest's offense, by default, were turning it over a lot. And when you look at all these losses that they've had, it's turnovers. It's not necessarily interceptions all the time, but it is turnovers that has led to Eaton basically being a non-factor in this district.
Yeah, we thought that they weren't as much of a disappointment as Horn was. I would think you would agree with that. But they were a team that we thought, man, they could get in that 4th spot there, and they're nowhere near that 4th spot. They crapped out. So,
but that being said, I can't see Haltom being competitive with Keller. No. But how disrespectful have I been in the past about Haltom? Right. I mean, we're how do you remember what year Haltom beat Trinity? Was it 2018?
Yeah, it was like. Yeah, 2019, I think.
2019.
Before COVID.
So, I mean, this is, not too far off from them being a really good, talented team. And, we're not too far away to where these kids don't remember that. They may have been 7th or 8th graders at that time. But obviously, there's a little bit of Haltom fighting spirit there. And like you're talking about Keller, there's a lot of injury questions there. And, a lot of depth issues that Haltom has been playing a consistently good game. If you remember, we lamented about it in week 3 when Boswell and Haltom got canceled because we wanted that information. We wanted that information to kind of see how Haltom would end up faring because they're very competitive in a couple of their losses with Everman and I think it was Richland or Birdville or one of those teams over there. And now they have shown that they're right there. They're going to be playing in week 11 for the chance to go to the dance.
Go to the dance. And a reminder, a lot of these games, we'll tell you if a game's on Friday, but most of these big games that we're talking about are Thursday night games in week 11, just to let you all know if you're going. If it's a Friday game, we'll say something. But right now, they're all, including the one we're going to talk about next, which is in 5-6A for the district title, Prosper and McKinney.
And you know what? That's actually a Thursday game more. But you know who is staying strong to Friday night games? It's District 6-6A. Mm-hmm. It is District 6-6A that is staying. You know what? Friday nights still matter. 4-6A, 4-6A is Team Thursday. 3-6A is Team Thursday. But you want some Friday night action. If you're a 3-6A or 4-6A fan and you're feeling like I need to go see some good football on Friday night, go check out your local 6-6A games because they believe in Friday night football.
We're a district away. You couldn't wait one more district. As soon as
you're feeding misinformation. You're going to send somebody to McKinney North and North Mesquite or something.
I never said Prosper McKinney was on Friday. I said including Prosper McKinney's district game, which meant every game's on Thursday, and I said including Prosper McKinney. Now, Prosper
Okay.
McKinney is for the district championship. Teddy Ballgame will be out there before he meets up with you out in Melissa.
What kind of double headers is he getting out there? He gets Prosper McKinney and then Lovejoy Melissa as his double header?
He gets it. He requested.
My gosh, Teddy, touchdown Teddy, that's his name right there. He has got the doubleheader out there. He's going to be telling stories left and right. Main event caliber games. He got two.
Well, I guarantee you what his first story is going to be. Hey, Wizzy, I couldn't find a parking space at all. Melissa, what the heck am I doing here? Where am I supposed to park? In Lovejoy and walk to Melissa? Because that place can be packed by the time he gets there. Hopefully,
you go park at Buc-ee's and take a shuttle in.
Hopefully, a band parent is leaving and he can slide in there real quick, get one of their spots. Can we talk about McKinney Prosper? I've only brought up.
We're going to talk about Lovejoy and Melissa now because that's the game we've been.
McKinney Prosper because McKinney.
Lovejoy is like the district right above Collin County. That's like a friend of 6-6A, and we got to get there. But Prosper McKinney, we were talking about McKinney potentially being aligned to 6-6A in our realignment talk, and these two teams are two teams I can't figure out. We're getting to Prosper McKinney now because you got Prosper, who I think should beat Allen by a couple of scores, and they're winning these 1-point games. And you got McKinney, who I thought Geyer was just going to completely obliterate them after Allen beat McKinney by 4 scores. And it's like McKinney turned the light switch back on. So which version of McKinney are we going to get? Are we going to get the McKinney that beats Rock Hill by 4 in a game that they shouldn't have won, or the McKinney that is losing to losing to Allen by 24? Or are we going to get the Allen, or are we going to get the Geyer that beats McKinney by 17? Come on, Coach Shavers, text us right now.
Which one?
Get us this information. Which version of McKinney are we going to get?
You might get the version that played a Geyer team that apparently, according to some shooter friends of mine that were at that game, Geyer team had half the team had the flu, and that he had to shoot on the other side of the field because they were getting sick all over the sidelines. He's like, I don't want to step in any of this mess. And I actually had a bobblehead guy coming on, Josiah Martin. He had to cancel because he went to the ER because he was so sick on Saturday. So there may be that factor in there. But like you said, you don't know. You don't know who's going to show up, and that's why this one's for the district title. I'm probably going to go Prosper on this one. I just think it's going to happen for them because me, I always turn my back on Prosper and they end up in the regional final. But I think they may actually flip the script on me this year. Instead of coming in as the 4th place team, they'll go into playoffs as the 1st place team.
But you know what? This gives me an opportunity to be right. Like I had fired McKinney, had fired Mansfield Summit, right. And now we're just 2 wins away from McKinney winning the district and Summit potentially getting 2nd place in their district. And all of a sudden we're like, Diggsy, we're back at that point. So I'm going to take McKinney over Prosper. I think given that Prosper hasn't really shown defensively that they're going to shut them down, teams that have really good defenses are able to shut McKinney down pretty handily. But Prosper, they're having to outshoot. They're having to win their games 37, like the Prosper game or the Rockwell game. This game against Allen, they're having to win these shootouts, and I think McKinney can win the shootout. So if this goes shootout, I think McKinney is going to win the game.
All right, we got to your district 6-6A, the district you want to talk about. We very rarely show up at games together unless it's a Thursday. But guess what, Diggs? We're together on a Friday. I'm going to get on the.
Tell us why, Ward.
I'm getting on the bus to head on out to Kimbrough. It's going to take me a while to get out there, but I'll get out there to give my man Diggsy 2 brand new shirts, to give the Plano East training staff a big, humongous check, and to see if the Plano East Panthers can knock off Marcus and be postseason bound. Diggs, tell me what you think about this ball game.
I think that Plano East has a really good opportunity to make the playoffs. That's what I'm viewing. I think the stars can align. Marcus is Marcus is one of those underrated teams because people look at that record, they look at 4-5, and they're like, new coach, 4-5, they're done. And but then you look at their non-district schedule. I actually put Marcus as number 25 in our rankings this week because when you look at kind of what Marcus has done, it looks like they figured it out. We talk about teams figuring it out late. They beating Plano 50-7 or whatever they did is not necessarily that's kind of the Marcus of old. That's kind of what Marcus was doing last year. And you look at what Marcus did against Coppell and Louisville. They lost both games, but they played 48 competitive minutes against both teams, and they were hard-fought games. Whereas the second tier, the Hebron, Plano East, Flower Mound, they're pretty much having liberal rotation starting in the second quarter against Coppell and Louisville. I mean, they pretty much had their way, and at that point, they're starting to get some freshmen in there and check that out. So Marcus right now looks like they're playing really good football, and the way they match up on that defensive line against Plano East offensive line, I think they have a bit of an advantage. I think Plano East will keep it close just because of the game and compression, and they play much better at home, but I think Marcus will find a way to win a very close game. Whoa. But two other important games.
I did not expect that from you, by the way. I totally
two other important games in this district: Louisville versus Hebron, Plano West versus Flower Mound. I think Louisville takes care of Hebron. I think Flower Mound, hopefully you texted them while I was ranting about something, takes care of Plano West, which will mean your fourth place team in District 66A, the Fighting Plano East Panthers, are taking the check home and taking a district certification all the way to Prosper, where next week they will beat the Prosper Eagles, your Prosper Eagles, in the first round and win their first playoff game since 2010. Let's go Panthers! Let's do this!
You got them beating Prosper, but you can't get them to have a home win against Marcus. All right, no. Interesting.
Gonna go beat Prosper.
So Hebron's really
big picture. We're looking at the big picture.
Hebron's really going to end up
second round. Maybe we beat we beat like a Berkner or somebody. We could go all the way. What I'm saying, all the way. 5-5-A2 will play 7-5-A2-8. That's Martin. I think that's Martin coming out. Plano East could beat Martin. I mean, Martin lost to Cedar Hill. Come on. So Plano East over Arlington Martin, and then we got North Crowley coming up after that, potentially. That's a winnable game. I got Plano East over North Crowley, and then we have to play Louisville probably again, or Louisville or Allen. We lost to Louisville pretty bad. But I think we're going to learn from our mistakes, like I think Duncanville and Southlake. So Plano East versus Duncanville, 5th round. Mark it down right there.
Mark it
down.
I
just pathwayed it.
Meanwhile,
now we know Duncanville can't handle a Panther. They got Panther on Panther action. So Plano East North Shore State Championship. Will you have a crew out there for that one?
For a state championship, I'll probably have
for the Houston team. I want Houston to watch Plano East win their first state championship. I need that crew to watch firsthand as the Panthers beat North Shore in the state championship.
Wide open, right, and see them pouring champagne all over themselves.
That's the 4 o'clock game this year, right? So you can get that on the Houston show. Yeah,
it is. We'll get it on there. We'll definitely get that on there.
Well,
Hebron, I'm trying to talk to you about how Hebron's really killing themselves for that Marcus game. You talk about a game in week 4 that may be meaningless. You not meaningless.
Plano East killing themselves for that Hebron game.
Well, they got
we got homecoming and stadium named on us. How are you supposed to overcome that, Ward? How are you supposed to handle Brian Brazel? I mean, one of the greatest coaches in our generation, one of the leading proponents of Christianity and faith and coaching, and his coaching tree is legendary. They named that stadium after him against us. Why?
There it goes.
Why are you going to do that against us? Brazel would not have wanted that. He would have wanted that against like Plano West and their 18 home crowd people coming to that game because Plano West, Hebron is closer to Plano West than it is to their own stadiums. Coach Brazel would have wanted that game against Plano West. That's what Coach Brazel would have wanted.
They did it, and it got done. And now you're in this predicament where you have to sweat it out here in week 11. Same thing with the Hawks.
I don't know if I ever told this story on the podcast, but I'm going to tell it right now anyway. My last meeting with Coach Brazel, amazing guy. It was when I was named the Sports Writer of the Year, and he was in the Hall of Fame. He got dedicated to the Hall of Honor, and I was wearing full-on Panther, dress clothes. I had a yellow tie and black pants and black shirt, and he was in full-on Hebron colors. He had like the blue tie, and he was wearing Hebron colors. And he comes up to me and he's like, Diggs, you're wearing full on Panther colors right now. Like, you're wearing full on Hebron colors. And we both kind of gave each other the knowing nod because he was at Prestonwood at that time. We shook hands and kind of gave the bro hug, and we both did our things. And who knew that would be the last time I'd get to interact with him. But obviously he bled Hebron colors even when he went over to Prestonwood to get that double dip, that rehire money, and all that, and ended up his last year was at Prestonwood and got a stadium named after him. And you're talking, I know you want to talk, see, I make it all serious now. You want to talk about that 34-33 game. I want to talk about that Plano East Hebron game where Plano East probably could have won that game too. But I'm sure Hebron's kicking themselves for that Marcus game because Marcus hadn't quite figured it out by the time that game came around. And Hebron blew a 3-score lead, blew it in overtime. Like I told you, Hebron will make 3 or 4 mistakes a game on you. Can you capitalize on them? And they sure made those mistakes in the second half against Marcus in spades.
I'll never learn. When it gets to 6-6A, I just need to hit my mute button, wait for you to finish, and move on to the next district. So I'll never get a word in edgewise on any district named 6 and then another 6A. But
it's a better world if you don't talk about high school football, Ward. I mean, just let me talk about high school. So I can give you great, amazing analysis about how Duncanville is going to beat DeSoto by 3 scores and Carroll is going to beat Byron Nelson by 2 scores. That's why people come onto this podcast, to hear analysis like that you can just look at the next week and go, Diggs, that Diggs was right.
Bank on it. Diggs knows what he's talking about.
Bank on it.
What do you want to talk about in 7-6A, my guy? Because most of those spots are all taken, or all the spots are taken.
It's all done. And, I think a thing to watch out was Warren Peck for Highland Park got banged up in that Richardson game, and he had to leave the game. So his health is going to be a bit of an issue. Parker Thompson came in, and the passing game kind of got a little bit on the edge there. It wasn't as good, but he can run the ball pretty well. So how is Highland Park? How is that going to is Peck going to get back there? I think Highland Park has their best chance if he is that quarterback. But Highland Park is definitely going to have a solid game against Pierce. That's one of those games that's not going to really matter, but if Peck is not in there and you got a Pierce that's playing for pride, this is the last time Pierce and Highland Park are going to be playing each other probably in the foreseeable future. That's one of those games that could end up being on upset watch, because at that point, why rush him back if he's only a week or 2 out? So Pierce has a really good opportunity to take advantage of that. So keep an eye on that. That's pretty much the only, I think, note of 7-6A is Pierce versus Highland Park could be a bit of an upset watch just because of the health of Highland Park and the meaningless nature of that game for Highland Park, because they are in.
It's always good for a team that's not going to make the playoffs to end on a win, so that might be nice for the Mustangs. So talk about moving to 8-6A. Another game I'll be at Thursday is the Martin Bowie game for the district title. I haven't personally been to an Arlington 6A game. I went to see Seguin last week, but looking forward to seeing the Martin squad. They've got things turned around. They really kind of dominated this district, and I have a feeling they're probably going to dominate this game as well.
Yeah, Bowie, talk about a team that is living right. Remember that Emerson game we were talking about with Lake Dallas, how there's onside kicks and crazy things, and, pretty much Emerson gave Lake Dallas that win. And we talked about, teams that earn it and fluky kind of things. A lot of coaches will tell me, they say, Diggs, when you use the word fluke, we feel very disrespected because football is not a fluke. Things happen for a reason. There are things that I think are high probability and low probability things. And typically speaking, in high school football, if you have a situation where you score 10 points in the last minute and a half, that's probably not going to happen if you replay that game 10 times. It's kind of a very special occurrence. And Bowie had a situation where they got down 28-21 with about 2.5 minutes left in the game. To their credit, they drove down the field and answered, but then they missed the extra point, Ward. So they're down 28-27 against Lamar. Then they got the extra, they got the onside kick, and they then they kicked a field goal and ended up getting 10 points in that last minute. And then Lamar returns the kick out to near midfield and almost has a chance to win it at the end. So An absolutely incredible game, but Bowie is just not on the level of Arlington Martin right now. Because you look at Bowie, and they won these games against Arlington, South Grand Prairie, and Arlington Lamar, all in these one-score, really close games, whereas Martin is just boat racing all those teams. Yeah. So I'm looking at Martin and Bowie. I think Martin is going to probably beat Bowie by 21, 28 points. I mean, Bowie lost to Plano. So at the end of the day, we have to kind of think to ourselves, where is this district in relationship to the other area districts? Well, Bowie played Plano and they lost. And Plano's not going to win a 6-6A game. And then you look at Arlington Martin and they lost to Cedar Hill. And Cedar Hill is the fourth place team in that district. So I think Arlington Martin has gotten better, but at the same time, Cedar Hill has gotten better as well. The fascinating game for me is going to be South Grand Prairie and Arlington Lamar.
That could turn it into a three-way tie there if things go that way. And then you can figure it out tiebreaker-wise.
Yeah, and we already have the math on this. They have a 21-point cap. So if Arlington Martin can win this game by 14 points, they're going to knock South Grand Prairie all the way out of the playoffs. South Grand Prairie will end up fifth place. So South Grand Prairie is playing for their lives in this game, but I think South Grand Prairie will take care of business. But both of these teams have played one half. We keep talking about all these teams in this district are playing one half games. Lamar finally gave us 48 minutes, and they dang near beat the second seeded Bowie with that. They just couldn't finish. So to me, this has a definite upset watch on it. I just don't know if they're good enough to beat South Grand Prairie by 14.
Yeah, that would be. They got the momentum from that Bowie game, even though they lost. But I don't know if they can come out and pull that kind of win. We know the teams in 9-6A that are going to the postseason. Talk about this Garland Wiley. This is about feeling right going into the postseason, and Wiley hasn't been feeling right for a while. Garland, if they can get a win over Wiley, maybe they'd feel a little good because they're going up against a tough district in 10-6A. You may even think it's 3-1 for 10-6A and the 10-6A 9-6A battle, but. Talk about this game and how important it is, especially for a team like Wiley, to try to get right.
Wiley has got to get right. They have not looked good in the last couple of weeks. But, I remember, Ward, I listened to what you say. And when you tell me about that North McKinney, we call them McKinney North now. But it is North McKinney if you want to view it. Yeah. North. Why is it McKinney North and not like Mesquite North? Why? I don't know. These are these philosophical questions that we have to answer
for another time.
At some point. We'll have a philosophical thing. Like, why do we call Newman Smith what we call Denton Ryan? Why don't we call him Billy Ryan? We'll talk about it. We'll have to figure out some of these things. But I think Wiley should beat Garland if Wiley gives us anything close to what they've had before this little funk that they've been in. Wiley's kind of put them in that funk. You look at the fact that they played a one-score game with Naaman Forest, and then North Garland comes out last week and beats Naaman Forest by a couple of scores. So Wiley certainly has got to get right. And you look at 9-6A versus 10-6A. I really like what Saxe is doing. I really like what Wiley East is doing. So those are two teams. We're looking at potentially Saxe and Rockwall Heath in the first round. Saxe may go mess around and win that game. I definitely don't. And then Wiley East against Tyler Legacy, I think, is how that's going to end up working out. Wiley East is probably going to be a big favorite. So I think we're looking at 2-2 there. And North Forney, again, we're still trying to figure out what North Forney is. And I think this week, as we kind of jump over to 10-6A, as we're kind of putting them together, I think North Forney has a really good chance. Can they beat a Rockwall Heath team that doesn't have all the athletes on the field, but is very well coached and is playing very efficient football? Because North Forney has played high and low and, some kind of crazy football. But Rockwall Heath has just been kind of this very slow kind of a progression up their potential ladder, and their potential ladder has shown to be really good, and they're playing really good football at the right time. I was completely surprised at how dominant they were against Roy City this past week. I know it's some crazy weather stuff, but beating them 38-3, it's pretty impressive, Ward.
It is very impressive. And you say we don't know what North Forney is, but the one thing we do know that they aren't is what many thought they were at the beginning of the season, which was 6th or 7th place team in that district. Well, no, they're going to be at the worst 3rd place. And they've got to hang their hat on this season, regardless of what happens to Heath. If they lose their next 2 games, Heath and I think you said Wiley East is who they probably would play. They still got to be proud of what they've accomplished this season. And they're 2 years up here in 6A football, so they're playing some good ball. let's move to 11-6A. We have a new district winner. It's going to be DeSoto this year. We've already figured it out. We know who the teams are, but you want to talk about Skyline a little bit. Let's talk about them.
This game against Richardson, Pierce, and Highland Park kind of remind me of this Skyline game because there are teams that, return 18 to 20 players. Pierce is going to return a lot back next year. And this is a chance because you're going to have a game where doesn't mean anything for Waxahachie. Skyline has played some really good football the last few weeks, even though they've lost a couple of those games. And I think Skyline has a really good chance. And Skyline, I don't think is going to be in this kind of a district next year because we know things are going to be changing. I think they might end up with Irving schools or Richardson schools, depending on how that ends up shaking out. We might even see a Richardson DISD Irving alignment. So I think Skyline could be a really under the radar team. They're going to be a team we're going to be talking about in our campfires in 2024 as a team that is a potential. We talk about when we talk about rankings, we put Berkner in number 25 to get things started, and it kind of let us know we thought Berkner was going to be making that step. In some ways they did, in some big ways, in other ways injuries kind of derailed where Berkner was going this year. Skyline looks to be that team for next year. So keep an eye on Skyline and keep an eye on how Skyline finishes this season because I know their coaching staff is really looking at taking this and using it as a springboard to the next level where I think Skyline has a really good chance to be good next year. Like you said, 11-6A has no real drama in it. 12-6A does have some interesting drama because you've got three teams tied for first place and how that kind of shakes out. There is a potential right now that if, depending on how it was, you and I don't do super syntax. I know you hate super syntax. No. And in fact, you're watching our ratings dip as we start talking about 12-6A as we speak. But you got Harker Heights, you got Pflugerville, Weiss, and Midway all beat each other by 14 or more points. So you might have a situation where even though Pflugerville, Weiss beat Harker Heights, that they may have to flip a coin depending on how their DEC runs. And you may see Harker Heights moving up to that first seed, even though that they didn't beat Pflugerville Weiss. So DeSoto fans need to keep an eye on that because you don't know who you're playing at this point, and you don't even know if you're going to get a home game because depending on how the rules may end up, if Harker Heights ends up in the first position in the seeding, the 1, 2, 3, 4s, but they maintain the seeding for D2 based on the game heads up, you may see a neutral site game between DeSoto and Harker Heights because both might be seeded as number one as technically district champions, and they would have to play at a neutral site by UIL rule. So that's why you should care about 12-6A. But do I have all the answers? I am not super syntax. I apologize.
Yeah. I'll let somebody just tell me what happens in 12-6A instead of actually following it.
We'll wait for Sunday when we start to get playoff pairings, and we'll know, okay, that's what happened.
That's what happened. Hey, 3-5A Division I, I'm excited about the Thursday game between Ryan and Northwest because we see Northwest race out to an 8-1 season, and yet they have not had a single highlight on our airwaves because we weren't sure about them. And then they started playing little lesser teams down the stretch, and now they're going to play a Ryan team who, as you mentioned last year, they got Mustard out there quarterback now. He may not be a strong arm thrower, but again, like you said last week, you get your athletes the ball as much as you can. And if they're taking it right from the center, that's as much as you can right there. So that's going to be an interesting game to tell us who Northwest is. Is that what you agree with me on that?
I agree with you on that, but I also need to know who Denton Ryan is because we're still trying to figure out #StillRyan. Is this the team that lost to the Colony or played Aledo to their toughest 5A opponent of the year? There's definitely a huge swath of variability in losing to the Colony and playing Aledo to a one-score game where you're up with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and maybe if one or a couple things, if Haas Haney wasn't able to bust that run out in the fourth quarter, maybe even potentially pull one of the biggest upsets. That version of Denton Ryan should beat Justin Northwest. Obviously, the version of Denton Ryan that messed around with the Colony is probably not going to win. It's like McKinney. We just don't know what we're going to get out of Denton Ryan on every single week. But we're starting to see some of these trends. Lancaster is another one of those teams that you're starting to see, okay, they figured out the quarterback thing. You're starting to see better play in the running back situation. you're starting to get a little bit more trust. And Denton Ryan is earning a little bit more of my trust. So I'm going to take Denton Ryan over Justin Northwest. I think it's going to be a slugfest because you got two teams that like to run the ball right now. Northwest, this is not your Jake Strong Northwest team. This is not your running the ball, throwing the ball all over the place. This is a team that is doing it on the ground. So we're going to have a very compacted game, very short game. But I think Denton Ryan wins like a 21-14 kind of a game.
Yeah, they're going to have Ife out there. Ife, and I can't pronounce his last name, but running all over the place. So that'll be awesome. It's been a long road for you to give Denton Ryan there at least a little bit of respect. Well, this has been 11 weeks, and you're finally giving him a little taste.
Hashtag doubt Diggs and hashtag Diggs doubt and hashtag still Ryan. These are trending together.
The reason these games are important, though, is because 4-5A Division I is no slouch. You got teams at the top there. We've said this millions of times. They got the best receivers in probably the state in this district. Two of them, again, are going at it again this week for the district title as Taz Williams from Red Oak goes up against Bryant Wesco and Midlothian. Midlothian is another team that's had to struggle to earn your respect. I think they got it last week, and now they're going into Red Oak. They moved the game from Friday to Thursday. We'll have my man Jason Robot down there to get the highlights of that one. Talk to me about what you think in that game. I personally probably think this is a Midlothian win, regardless of it being on the road, just because Red Oak plays way too many close games for a 9-0 team to be able to win all of them.
Right, and that's the problem with Red Oak is that they keep finding really creative ways to win, whereas what Midlothian has done ever since they've kind of got their ship's bearing straightened out after the Arlington-Seguin game, Arlington-Seguin is just messing up everything. 5A Division I, 5A Division II, Arlington-Aubrey out there. We have people complaining about my rankings being off because I gave Seguin the win over Aubrey, even though it ended at halftime. Seguin is just 4A, 5A. If they played a 6A game, they'd probably be ruining us there too. But Red Oak and Midlothian, both teams played Arlington-Seguin, so you kind of look at that and go, okay, advantage Red Oak. But like you said, Midlothian seems to have figured it out. They figured out how to get Bryant the ball. They figured out kind of how to lean in. They've kind of figured out the chemistry issues that were lacking in Red Oak. I just look at the Lake Belton game as kind of that game to go, okay, Midlothian, they pretty much dominated Lake Belton. It was a game that was not even close. Red Oak really struggled to win that game and needed about 3 or 4 things to go right to win that game. I think Red Oak would have to have a very special showing where they had a special teams play and a couple of turnovers to beat Midlothian. I think Midlothian is going to win a 35-21, 35-28 kind of a game.
And that was a Midlothian team with the backup quarterback in for a good 90% of the game, if not the whole game. I can't remember when he came in there. So Midlothian's really found something here, and they're playing some foosball, as they say in the movie Waterball. They're playing the foosball. Hey, we got a winner you're in game on Thursday. Oh, actually, it's a Friday game. Here's another Friday game. Birdville against W.T. White. Birdville, man, you know what? The way W.T. White played against Newman Smith, man, I got some good feelings about them. I know it's on the road at Birdville, but do they really have a humongous home field advantage? I don't know. I haven't been to a home game at Birdville. Man, I want to kind of nudge W.T. White into the postseason.
There's definitely a good argument to be made for that. But, I just think of how Newman Smith, beat Birdville and took care of business and then just got blown out by Richland and Timberview. And maybe that could have spoke to Richland and Timberview. But Newman Smith, even though that game was back and forth, there was a game of runs. I think it was like 26-7 at one point. Newman Smith was up on that game before W.T. White got 3 scores, 2 back-to-back, and then got the ball in the third quarter and was able to get the lead. But Newman Smith was still able to do that. I can't see W.T. White slowing down Birdville. So I think Birdville is going to be the favorite, but I can't argue with you. This looks like one of those games that W.T. White might be able to do something special in this game, but I'm going to stick with Birdville.
And then we go to 6-5A because they only got one game left that matters. We can kind of sitting on this one. Frisco's been on all the games that matter down the stretch here just because the way their schedule has lined up. And now Frisco's playing Wakeland, and it's to avoid Richland or to avoid Timberland. You got to play one of these two teams, but who do you think wins this one? I've seen Frisco. I think you've seen you saw him in the 10-7 game. I saw him in a game where it's kind of a boring offense to beat Sherman. it's a tough offense to watch. Can they find a way to get past Wakeland? I don't think they can. Tell me if you do.
They can't, but at the same time, Wakeland may look at things and think, "Man, we match up better against Richland." And I know that's weird to say, but you're talking about Timberview. The way their strength of their team is going to be their athletes, and I think Wakeland might be like, okay, I think we might be able to match up a little bit better against Richland in the first round. I think Wakeland was kind of looking at things. I think if beforehand you would ask me who I would pick between Wakeland and Richland before that game, I would have taken Wakeland over Richland, and really nothing has changed much other than our perception of Timberview. So finding out who they are, I don't know that Wakeland wants Timberview, so might we see a little bit of a tanking job? I think they're going to probably just go ahead and take the win that's there, because like you talked about, Frisco offensively has been just really bad the last couple of weeks, and I can't see them stepping up. But of those three teams that they've played the last 3 weeks, Wakeland's defense is probably more questionable than Reedy and Lone Star's defense. So I think Frisco's offense will have a little bit more firepower against Wakeland's defense, but I can't see Wakeland not scoring whatever they want against Frisco. So Wakeland is probably a 21, 28-point favorite in this game. But the question I think they have to truly ask ourselves in Wolverine country is, do you want to win this game, Wolverines? Who would you rather have, Richland or Timberview? I think it's at least a thought. I think I don't think they're going to do it, but I think it's one of the things you talk about in the coaching office as a hypothetical. Who would we match up a little bit better against? I think the answer might be Richland.
That is a very interesting question you posed out there.
I'm here to provide questions, Ward. I don't have all the answers, but I do have a lot of questions.
It's not going to happen. They won't tank, but that's an interesting question, though. Let's move to 7-5A, because you just mentioned earlier, about an hour ago, that Lancaster's probably going up to 6A next year. At least they have the 6A numbers. Man, they certainly don't want to leave 5A by not making the postseason. They got to beat Lufkin to get there. So tell me about that.
They got to beat Lufkin. They got to lose by less than 5 to avoid making it out of there. But I think they're going to be big favorites in this game. I would be more worried about this game if it were at Lufkin to have to deal with that. Lancaster having to go on back-to-back road trips, so they had to go to Lufkin and then go out to Barbers Hill the next week. That's a lot of tripping at this point of the year. So they're pretty much so having this home game and having that chance to recalibrate before things, I think is going to be good. And watching Lancaster, it looks like that we're back down to one quarterback. Kewan Lacey is really running the ball very well for Lancaster. I think they're going to be better than a Lufkin squad that will be giving you everything they got, because they got to win, and they got to win by 5, and they see a pathway. So we're going to get everything we can from Lufkin. But I think Lancaster's going to win this game by 2 scores. Excellent. Then they got to go out to Barbers Hill, where you will have a camera crew.
You figured out the tiebreaker there, because it looks like 8-5A is going to have a 3-way tiebreaker if everything holds. LaPorte's already done. Barbers Hill is going to win their game against Porter. By the way, Cody Fuentes, we talk about how DJ Bailey's underrated. Cody Fuentes is about as underrated as you get down in the Houston area at quarterback for Barbers Hill. And then you got Port Arthur Memorial. But you figured out this tiebreaker when they all ends up finishing.
I didn't figure it out. We'll give all credit to Matt Stepp, insider over there at TexasFootball.com, because apparently they had to have a meeting over there in 8-5A to figure out these tiebreakers, because there was some confusion even within the coaches. But there was a question on what that cap was going to be, because all three of those teams not only beat each other, but beat each other pretty handily. And with a 14-point cap, Barbers Hill wins the first seed if it happens, and you got Port Arthur Memorial with the second seed, and you got LaPorte with the third seed, which means that you got one over there. 8-5A would play 4, so Lancaster would have to go to Barbers Hill to play that game, and then LaPorte, playing at Barbers Hill, can say goodbye to Barbers Hill Stadium, and they can come up here and visit lovely Forney as the current projection.
Yeah, big.
You'll probably have a camera crew there too. You're just gonna be double dipping this 7-5A, 8-5A.
Anytime I can get them 2 birds, man, I got this one stone. Hit them both. By the way, let's give a tip of the cap to Stepp. I know he watches this every time and again. The man comes through for me all the time as far as information that you need. He comes through for the whole state, to be honest with you. I know he's a good friend of yours as well. The man is all things Texas high school football. And to think when I moved here in 2006, I thought he was living full-time in Canada and he knew more about Texas high school football than I would ever do. And I'm like, what is happening in this state when we got a Canadian just killing us down here? But he
I feel like
explained.
you're creating a music video. Like we have like "Wind Beneath My Wings." Did you ever know that
He's
you're
the hero
my
to most, like
hero?
Elvis. Elvis was a hero to most, but he never meant
And everything
hero
I'd
to
like
be.
to be. People
Uh-oh.
compliment us on our music tastes here on
They ain't
Inside High
complimenting
School
that.
Sports. So
You
perhaps
won't get a
the
compliment on
dig
that.
singing can get us to that next level.
The
I can
compliments come
sing
when
us out.
I get on the mixer and start mixing things, not when you're up there singing
You're probably going to
ridiculous
like,
songs.
for copyright reasons, because of how quality that version of that song was, you're probably going to edit me out because you don't want to have to worry about copyright violations
Yes,
on that
exactly.
YouTube with my
There's
beautiful singing. We're going to go full on Bette Midler.
there's about 40 minutes of this thing I'd like to edit you out of, but I can't. I don't have that much time. Let's move on to 3-5A Division Two. Uh, the last we got Lake Dallas and Denton in here fighting for wherever they fall in the standings because these teams are already set with who's going to the postseason. Talk to me about Lake Dallas and the Denton Broncos.
This game is only interesting to me is because how competitively Lake Dallas and Frisco Memorial played. And then I think of Denton and Frisco Memorial and how competitive that game was. Now, like, which version of Lake Dallas are we going to get? Are we going to get the Lake Dallas that is like a more of a Lamborghini and is able to play the Creek Views and Independences and beat the heck out of them? Or are we going to get the team that, Denton's able to do some offense? So I think Lake Dallas is a favorite, but I'm going to be very interested in how they win this game because you remember Emerson beat Denton by like 60. So what is Lake Dallas going to do relative to, we know how Memorial worked out, and are they that version of Lake Dallas and maybe got a little bit lucky in that game against Emerson, or has Lake Dallas figured something out? So this is a game where I'm more interested in the style points than I'm interested in the winner. Lake Dallas is going to win this game, but are they going to win it with style points, or are they going to win a close 48-minute game? That's what we have to find out.
I think Lake Dallas game against Memorial was a one-off. I think we can.
It can be.
I think we.
But
can
I think the game against Emerson was a one-off. I think that Emerson, you play that game 10 times, Emerson's going to probably win 8 or 9 of those 10 games.
I think when Lake Dallas faces, and they, again, I don't have the playoffs in front of me, but if they face Grapevine, I think they're going to shock you and beat Grapevine. So what do you think about that? Do you have something to say to me on that? Am I stupid?
I mean, Grapevine is going to be playing Frisco Emerson, so you don't
Well, I
really.
am stupid.
So you are wrong about that. They're going to get Arlington Heights, and yeah, Lake
Go
Dallas
get
is going to beat
Heights.
Arlington Heights.
All right. God, I thought I was walking out here on a ledge and making all sorts of great predictions, but
I would pick him over Grapevine personally too. So if that game happened, you're right. So your ledge out there is right. Your numbers are wrong as far as it goes. But you know what? My numbers are wrong all the time. So I just say things and then I double down when I'm wrong. That's what I do. That's how I handle my business. They play today. Duncanville over DeSoto by 35 right now.
I need to put a text in to Coach Chris and find out what's happening with Cade Barrett. Are we going to have him for the postseason? Because they're taking on Colleyville Heritage. Barring a monumental upset, they're going to be the 4th seed coming out of here.
They're the 4th seed either way, even if they beat
Colleyville. 4th seed either way.
But to me, I want to see them. I want to see OD White at their best. So I hope he gets in there just to give us one game, so we can see what OD White could have been this year. And give Colleyville Heritage a little bit of a tussle because Colleyville Heritage is going to be right there when it comes to this playoff run coming up. So I think they could use a little bit of a test. So I'm kind of hoping for a competitive game for Colleyville Heritage, and because I went out on that ledge picking OD Wyatt to be that 3rd seed in this district, and Arlington Heights took care of business. But again, their best player was not playing. So I'm hoping OD White can get in there and give us a little bit of what we thought we were going to get out of OD Wyatt to start out with. So you contact Coach Chris and you tell him to rush him back out there. If he's got to be on a football, he's got to have the boot out there, get him on the boot. He can go out there one game. It's his one game.
He can drop back and throw off his other foot.
That's right.
Somehow. And not break it any worse than it is. That's another good thing. A thing about Colleyville Heritage. We don't know. I mean, we at least in prior years we could see them against Grapevine and say, okay, that's their challenge game. We can see what they got. They weren't challenged in that one, and nobody thought they were going to be challenged. And now they aren't going to be challenged in their first game when they played Denton. Where are we with Colleyville Heritage? It's another team that's doing great and it's been on my airways one time against Grapevine because they're not playing that many, at least during their district schedule. So Where are you on that team? How do you feel about them? I'm kind of nervous about them, to be honest with you.
Well, the way that my memory of the playoffs go is that they're in the Argyle's half of the bracket, so that they're going to get Argyle in round 3, which, I mean, I would say that's their ending point as far as that goes. But I think that's where they'll get is to that Argyle game. And then the other half of the district will be Lake Dallas and Frisco Emerson, and maybe a West Texas team might get in there. But I still think we're going for an Emerson-Argyle rematch at the end of the day. That's how I'm seeing things.
Yeah.
But Colleyville Heritage, this version of Argyle, I don't think they can be competitive with – Colleyville Heritage can be competitive with this version of Argyle.
Yeah. All right, I agree. Let's move on to 5A Division II. You got Ennis against Summit. You know, I've really taken a liking. We're talking about Ennis and Summit, but I've really taken a liking to Seguin. How hard they played Heritage. Should have won that game, but threw a couple picks in the end zone. They beat Midlothian, and now they've taken some losses. But man, I'd love to find a way to get them into the postseason, and Ennis would have to lose to Summit, which I believe is going to happen. And we've given Summit the business this whole year, but Summit has made it through their district 5-1 and found themselves in the playoffs and found themselves. Well, we'll talk about the next district after this, but they found themselves a way of not having to play sock.
Yeah, maybe, as we'll talk about. But with Summit, they're very inconsistent. So we just don't know what we're going to get out of Summit. But Ennis has been right there. Ennis, Everman, Seguin, all these teams have been showing us inconsistency. In Midlothian Heritage has been the consistent one, which is why they're sitting in potentially at 7-0 and 10-0 and look like they're there because they have played the consistent football. Everman, barely beat Corsicana this past week. I mean, it's what version of Everman are you going to get? Ennis down 25-0 to Seguin in the first quarter at points, and Ennis has been up and down. And then Summit just got completely blown out by Midlothian Heritage in that game. So I think when you have these two inconsistent teams, I look at Summit and their depth on the offensive and defensive lines. I mean, I think Ennis has got the playmakers, but Summit's got the infrastructure. So I'm going to take Summit in this game. But ultimately, Everman would have to beat Midlothian Heritage for Seguin to get in there. I just don't really see that happening either, so I think you're going to be sad.
I will be sad. I like that Seguin team. I actually like their uniforms, too. I don't know how many other people do, but I do like it. It's very sweet for me. But you found some information out about 6-5A Division II and their zone play stuff. I want you to tell the people about it because when you were telling me it seemed ridiculous to me, and I had to make some text. You had to make some text, and it turns out to be true. So tell me about this zone play and why we're not seeing the winners of last week's quote-unquote semifinals playing each other in the zone finals.
And I've been complaining about this, and we may be wrong about this. I mean, I'm being told that maybe some of the coaches that sounded like they had good information didn't have good information, so we're still trying to get clarity on that. But basically, because 6-5A has some weird rules, last year we had Sauk versus Seagoville, and we had Woodrow Wilson against Kimball in the semifinals, and then the winners played each other in the finals, and that was your 1 versus 2 and 3 versus 4, and that happened like we did. So this week we had the same 4 teams, or this year we had the same 4 teams playing, but the winners are not playing each other in coming up because they've already played each other. So apparently there's a caveat that if you've already played each other, you're just going to play the other team, but we're only going to use the 2 games in these 4 in the playoff window to break all ties and to break all and for seeding. So there's a situation where you've got, if what we're hearing is right, where Woodrow Wilson can beat Kimball after losing to Sauk by 49, after losing to Seagoville, and somehow get in the 2nd seed and host a home playoff game. And there's also a scenario if Sauk loses to Seagoville this week that they fall to 3rd in district, even ignoring all of those other games because they would be at 1-1 and they would lose the tiebreaker to Seagoville because they lost to Seagoville in this window. This is one of the most inane things I have ever seen, and I think everybody in the state of Texas is going to be happy when zone play is done because this is ridiculous. It should not be happening like this. It's not good for the kids. It's not good for the state. It's a bad look on Dallas ISD. And they have no athletic director right now who can even speak to this mess because we're getting all kinds of craziness because they haven't named it. I even think the people in power right now have to be looking at this going, what the heck is going on here with this setup to where we don't have two teams playing each other, that the game doesn't, really count for anything at some point. And how are we supposed to be marketing Dallas ISD football as must-see TV, like these high-stakes games, when we have 1 versus 3 and 2 versus 4 in your finals, your main event? I don't like it, Ward.
I don't like it either, man. They've got to, and the coaches that I texted, they're like, "Yeah, we'll be done with this zone. We're done with it as well." And it was done to maybe cater to SOC to get them some competition or be able to play more non-district games so they can get ready for the postseason. But boy, it's just a mess. And man, if what you're saying is true, it's going to be nasty. And let's just hope the winners win out and we have what we usually have here. So. We'll see what happens, but let's move on to 7-5A. The monster matchup you'll be at Thursday. You've been talking about it all year. Melissa against Lovejoy. How healthy is Lovejoy? We don't know. I'm sure Parker Livingstone's not going to be playing, but with Jalen Lott taking over the spot there at wide receiver, I don't know if that's much of they can work around that. There's star-studded players everywhere. Everybody knows how it ended last year on the 2-point conversion down the stretch. Melissa wins it. Melissa stacked their schedule, so they got the 6 games at home this year. So they played 6 on the road last year. So they can get this game at home this year in brand new stadium. You'll be there. Teddy Ball game will be there. Talk to me what you think is going to happen this one.
If you can look at last week as perhaps a primer, it looks like the better defense is winning these games right now. The defense that steps up. And right now, Lovejoy's defense has been playing a little bit better than Melissa's defense throughout kind of this run. So I think we're going to see Lovejoy defeat Melissa. I've had Lovejoy over Melissa all year, and I think it's going to come down to defense. I think we're going to get some points on the board. I don't think we're going to have a 49-42 game like you had with that Argyle-Lovejoy game last year. That was crazy. I think it will be more approximate to what you saw last year, but I think Lovejoy is going to win like a 38-35, 35-28 kind of a game over Melissa because I think their defense is going to step up. Melissa's been putting up 40, 50, 60 points a game. So for Melissa to be held to 28-30 is going to be a big feather in the cap, and I can't see Melissa holding Lovejoy under that. So I think Lovejoy is going to find a way to win this game. And that's big because if SOC that's your second round game, if SOC is your first seed.
Interesting. And I think this thing's going to go down to the wire. And I think it's going to be an awesome game. I kind of wish I was going there, but sometimes you got to cater to Ted or he'll just start laying on his back, kicking his feet and arms like a little baby. God, Ted, come on, man. Let me get a game like that sometime.
He's got the double main event for sure.
What can I do? All right. And what about Greenville and Crandall? Crandall needs to grab that win to get in there.
Greenville versus Terrell. Greenville can force a 3-way tie. As of last week, Crandall's out. So Crandall lost that 3-way tie if everything happens. So we're going to see Dennison and Terrell in there, but there could be some chaos if Greenville's able to beat Terrell and then pull a new 3-way tie with Crandall, Greenville, and Terrell. So depending on how that game goes, Crandall's got a little bit of life left, but I think Terrell's going to take care of business. But keep an eye on that as far as it relates to tiebreaker chaos.
All right, a quick small school stuff. You got 7 4A Division I, a couple 5-0 teams in district play going at it up at Kirkendale. Panther Creek against Salina. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Salina is a big favorite over Panther Creek. I think even though they are undefeated, I think Salina is at least 3 or 4 touchdowns better.
And then if you look at Anna going up against Sulphur Springs, that's another couple undefeateds in district play. I'm kind of leaning towards Anna. Your thoughts?
Anna played Paris to 1 point last week, so that's a little bit concerning on my end, but I think they're going to take care of business against Sulphur Springs this week. I think that was more of a one-off. You called like the Memorial thing a one-off. Yeah. I think that Paris game is a one-off, and I think Anna is going to answer back this week.
And then next week we talk postseason. I can't wait, man. 6-week
run. We're going
to
break it down.
State title, man. We'll have a bunch of games we'll talk about. I can't wait to hear it. And make sure you catch his dump on Friday night. He'll be breaking things down as well. So I appreciate it, Diggsy. We'll talk.
I feel like I should have it on Thursday night this week, as you talked about, but we'll do it on Friday regardless. So.
Do it Friday. You have more time to relax.
So, all right, so mix your masterpiece and get us some music and get us out of here.
You're listening to it right now. I hear it. Beautiful, man. People love that.
I hear it.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you next week.
See you down the road.